On the 18th of April 1943, 4 local boys were poaching in Hagley Wood near Witchbury Hill when they came across a large wych elm. Thinking it was a good place to hunt birds' nests, one of the boys attempted to climb the tree to investigate. As he climbed, he looked down into the hollow trunk and discovered a skull. At first, he thought it was an animal, but after further investigation, he saw it had human hair and teeth and realised that he'd found a human skull. As they were on the land illegally, the boy put the skull back and all of them returned home without mentioning their discovery to anybody. The youngest of the boys though felt uneasy about what he had witnessed and decided to tell his parents. When police checked the trunk of the tree, they found an almost complete skeleton with a shoe, a gold wedding ring and some fragments of clothing. The remains of a hand were also found some distance from the tree itself. The body was sent for forensic examination, and it was established that the body was female and had been dead for at least 18 months, placing the time of death around October 1941. Material was also found in her mouth, leaving forensic scientists to believe the woman had been asphyxiated. From the measurement of the trunk in which the body had been discovered, it was also concluded that she must have been placed there still warm after the killing, as she could not have fit once rigor mortis had taken hold. Since the country was in the midst of World War II, identification was seriously hampered. Police could tell from items found with the body what the woman had looked like, but with so many people reported missing during the war, records were too vast for proper identification to take place. The current location of her skeleton is unknown, as is the autopsy report. A possible victim was reported to the police in 1944 by a prostitute, who claimed that fellow prostitute Bella had gone missing at the same time of the confirmed time of death. Shortly after, graffiti started appearing across Birmingham and specifically the Hagley obelisk, and has continued to do so sporadically over the decades. This still remains one of the biggest unknown mysteries of Birmingham, England, with people still asking today, who put Bella in the wych elm? The Devil's Footprints still remain one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the UK today. Occurring in the southwest of the country in 1855, the people of small towns and villages across southern Devon awoke after a heavy night of snowfall. To their amazement, footprints had been left in the snow, but these weren't ordinary footprints. These were a cloven hoof that was straight, single-line tracks and passed over rooftops, passed through walls, over rivers and continued on for 100 miles from the River Exe to Totnes on the River Dart. Confused and frightened, the people believed these were the footprints of the devil, stalking the towns and villages across Devon looking to punish sinners. In a time where belief in the devil was widely accepted, men armed with guns and pitchforks followed the trail, and when night descended, people locked their doors and kept loaded shotguns to hand. The tracks were measured at different points of the 100 miles, all measuring a consistent 8.5 inches. It was another week before the story reached the newspapers, with the London Times reporting on the 16th of February 1855, and adding that most of the gardens and villages showed traces of the strange visitor. There were many theories as to what made these tracks, from badgers, raccoons, rats, swans, otters, a kangaroo, and even the experimental hot air balloon whose end of the rope was trailing the ground. None of these though could explain how the footprints could stop at a 14-foot high wall, only to continue on the other side while still leaving untouched snow at the top of the wall. And if this was a hoax, how could the people involved travel 100 miles in one night, making sure all the tracks were equally spaced and not leaving any other tracks by mistake? The truth behind the devil's footprints may never be uncovered, and the only way of ever truly solving the mystery is for it to happen again. So the next time it snows, look for the tracks on the rooftops. The Hairy Hands of Devon is a supernatural story which can be traced back to the early 20th century. The incident occurs on the B3212, a stretch of road in Dartmoor, a quiet, desolate road flanked by hills and fields. Drivers and cyclists reported losing control of their vehicles, swerving off the road and in some cases resulting in fatality. Those lucky enough to escape with their lives told an unusual story indeed. They claimed that a pair of hairy hands had appeared out of nowhere and taken control of their car or bike and caused it to go off the road. In 1921, the malevolent force wreaked havoc, killing a medical officer of Dartmoor Prison, causing a coach driver to crash, injuring several passengers who had been thrown from their seats, and even an army captain reported that a pair of invisible hands had taken control of his motorcycle and forced him off the road. After getting nationwide attention through the press, tests on the road were carried out, with the crashes attributed to a camber of the surface which reached dangerous levels in places. This doesn't, however, explain the accounts of a woman in 1924 who was camping with her husband on the moor nearby the road. She reported a pair of hairy hands trying to enter the caravan, only to disappear when she made the sign of the cross. Even more compelling evidence is that of journalist Rufus Endell, who claimed that while on the road, a pair of hands appeared and he had to fight them to regain control of his vehicle. Luckily, he managed this and avoided a crash, with the hands disappearing just as inexplicably as they had appeared. Endell asked the author he was telling the story to not to publish it until after his death for fear of ridicule. The hairy hands of Devon mystery has never been solved. Some believe a rational explanation of the occurrence, but others believe it to be the hands of an unnamed man who died on the road, unable to be at peace and determined to terrorise the drivers who passed through his road. Whatever the answer, if you're ever driving on this quiet B road, always be prepared for the hairy hands of Devon. A true tale of the macabre, Overtoun Bridge has a history of sending man's best friend to their death. Since the 1950s, at least one dog a year has jumped from the bridge and perished. As if this wasn't strange enough, the jumps all occurred in the same place, on this Category B listed building in Dumbarton, Scotland, at the final two parapets on the right hand side of the bridge. That's not the only similarity either. All the dogs have been Labradors, Collies and Retrievers, all of which are long-nosed breeds. Only one dog has survived this tragic leap. Golden Retriever Hendrix was being taken for a walk by her owners when, inexplicably, the dog just jumped. Luckily, Hendrix landed on moss, which broke her fall, but the owners reported Hendrix shaking all night and her hair falling out as her owner rescued her. The phenomenon gathered international attention as a world of dog lovers became perplexed at the similarities of each jump, from where on the bridge it had occurred to the dog breeds. Many tests were carried out to determine why the dogs had jumped, with animal experts believing it to be the scent of a mink which lures the dogs to their deaths. Although this explanation is plausible, the bridge and where it's built have a history, with Overtoun being known as the Thin Place in Celtic mythology. This refers to it being an area in which heaven and earth are at its closest. This could explain why dogs are jumping to their deaths. Known for the extrasensory perceptions, animals, especially dogs, pick up on things where humans can't. And if this truly is the thin place, then maybe the dogs are feeling something we don't. But it's not just the dogs who have found a tragic end on this bridge. In 1994, a man threw his baby from the bridge, claiming the child was the devil incarnate. The man then tried to commit suicide by jumping off the bridge, but was unsuccessful himself. Whether the reason is scientific or something more supernatural, the bridge now has a warning for all owners to keep their dogs on a lead for their own safety. The Black Monk of Pontefract is widely regarded as one of the most violent hauntings in Europe and happened before the more famous Amityville and Enfield hauntings. In a small town in Yorkshire in the 60s, the Pritchard family endured years of torment from a truly evil force. Like most hauntings, this started harmless enough, puddles appearing and white powder falling from seemingly thin air. Just as quickly as the first phase of hauntings began, it stopped. and Mr. and Mrs. Pritchard, along with their son and daughter, lived in peace for 2 years. What happened after that, though, was truly terrifying. The ghostly activity came back with a vengeance, and this poltergeist had his eyes set on daughter Diane, who became the main target over the next several years. It wasn't long before crashing noises, flying objects, and even eggs being teleported around the house gave way to a more disturbing and physically violent experience. Diane was often thrown from her bed, and on one truly terrifying occasion, dragged up the stairs by her neck, leaving finger marks and bruises. It wasn't just the family who could verify the poltergeist activity. Throughout the haunting, the malevolence, named by the family as Fred, terrorised visitors including a priest and an MP. On 2 occasions, exorcisms and blessings of the house occurred, but this only exacerbated the situation, with Fred managing to paint upside-down crosses on the wall and destroy crucifixes which adorned the Pritchard household. After research, Fred was actually identified as a 16th century monk who hanged for the rape and murder of a girl. The Pritchard house, it was discovered, was built next to where the gallows once stood. Towards the end of their ordeal, the Black Monk of Pontefract manifested itself into a physical form one night in the Pritchards' bedroom. They described a monk dressed in black robes, face hidden in the darkness of the hood. The house to this day stands empty, with paranormal investigators going in but never being able to stay and investigate more than a couple of days as the Black Monk of Pontefract waits, ready to drive out the next occupants and carry on his reign of terror.